advisory on drafting, policy drafting committee. I'll see that we have audience here live, and then we have an audience on video. We have Jackie on and Ashley. Karen is coming in. Cat TV, Superintendent Cocaine, and Laura is in here, and Lisa. And then we have Fran, Dick, and myself. While they all coming on, I'll do what I like to do for the public in case if they didn't have all the agenda and everything else. We'll have a public comment. We'll have minutes from November 1st. We'll have a policy review 5185 anaphylaxis. Policy number 5145 condoms availability, and for FYI, 5140 immutable diseases, and B5100 screening. And then we'll go through the final review of the conversation, at least conflict of interest in hiring. That's in this form. And then we had for discussion a policy number 5090, interrogation or searching of students by law enforcement or other agencies. And we'll have a healthy discussion along that. And then we got the tracking sheets, and we have some other things out there for future consideration. So that agenda sounds okay for everybody. Do you want me to move anything around? We may have Dina join us later.
Dina is going to call in, so I would say, and she has a hard stop, so we may want to move her once we're done with the nurses, if she can call in then. She's not here yet.
Okay. So she may have some, and even when she do come, we can go back. We'll go back to hear what she has to say on those things.
She's coming in right now, so she should be here right after you. I told her the nurses are up first, and then we would try and get her in.
Okay. You want to move what up?
From what Jim's saying, we would move number 7 into the position of 6, conflict of
7,
interest.
yes.
Hiring.
Move
Okay.
number 7 to second on the, or right after number 4.
Okay, you want to move that one up to, all right. We're going to move 7.
After 5.
Oh, so she's going to be here for the discuss that.
Oh yeah, move 7 after 5.
Okay,
Right, but he's saying move it after 4.
he's saying that.
We'll do, I was wrong. I saw that number 5 will also involve our nurses, so right after number 5.
Okay,
Got it.
Okay, so she could, yeah,
all right.
don't have to keep asking for it.
So, yeah, along that line. So that will be done. And as we started out, only we know that one person, Chris Murphy, called in. I don't have anyone else out there that that's Dina. I did.
Yep.
I just want to remind Jackie, I did approach Bruce Lee Clark and let him know that we were going to have a conversation on 5090. He thought he may be trying to zoom in, but he didn't make it. And the reason for it, he's been working on that task force and so forth in the town. And so, but we're going to have plenty of time for everybody to get in on that or later on, just not tonight. So with that in mind, I'd like to start out with public comments. Are there any in here?
I have a
Online?
public comment. Can I have one?
Oh, yes.
Dina, you did your hair. Looks good. Inappropriate.
Okay, yes. It's I won't say anything here. We'll go ahead. All right.
Get more like Fran every day.
All right, we'll strike that one. So next thing we have on the agenda is minutes and the minutes from November 1. Hopefully everybody had a chance to go out and take a look at those and read those, and if you don't have any, comments for those, I'll take a motion. to
I'll
accept
move
the
them.
minutes.
Second.
It's been moved and second to accept the minutes as, printed in the package for this meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, any opposed? Nope, hearing none. All right.
Leon, I would just abstain. This is Nicole because I
Oh,
wasn't at the
there
meeting.
All right. You got him. Okay, Nicole is here now, too. All right, we got the minutes passed, we got one extension. The next item on the agenda is, anaphylaxis, and we have the nurses group that was gonna come here and do some, discussion and so
Yeah.
forth.
I'd like to introduce Ashley Walker. She's our lead nurse. She's not only our COVID-19 coordinator, she's also our lead nurse. And so she met with the nurses and we're glad to have her.
From Mount Anthony Middle School, if those who aren't MAU board members, you may not know where she works for us.
Any permission to share?
Okay, you want to share something else about it?
No, just share my documents.
Oh. Well, I'm glad you made it, Ashley, and we really appreciate everything you're doing with the group there before we even get started here. And,
You should be all set now, Lisa.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
okay, so, we'll start out with Ashley with, 5185 to give us a brief, overview of what was taking place there, by the nurses.
Yep. So the only change made to the actual policy language is we just took out that parents will be notified above, Lisa, because that's actually a procedure. So it really doesn't belong in the body of the policy. And then we just updated the actual admin regs to reflect current practices according to Vermont state standards and American Academy of Pediatrics. So we just kind of cleaned up the language a little bit with everything in there because there was a lot of stuff in there that did not belong in there that was specific to things that didn't belong in the policy. So it's been cleaned up to reflect what the current guidance is from the Vermont State Department of Health and American Academy of Pediatrics. So I don't know if anybody has any specific questions.
I just have a comment
Jackie?
yes, I just have a comment. The statement that you just deleted should be in the admin reg.
It's at the bottom of the admin regs.
If we're okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep, if you look down, I believe it's the last one, Lisa. Parent and guardians shall be
Right, it's on this, like, I guess, 4 pages or something along
I
that.
just went for that. Number 3,
Yeah, education,
under, yep, parents and guardians will be notified.
okay, so it will be notified. In a timely manner after medical treatment has been initiated.
Right, yep, that's correct.
Okay. All right, thank you for that, Jackie and Ashley. Are there anything else or any other questions or concerns with what has taken place there with with this policy? If not, then we'll get a nod if we are ready to send this on to SVSU for the next meeting of SVSU. Okay.
Tomorrow.
Oh.
Is that enough time? It's not gonna make it tomorrow.
But
No, it wouldn't be on the, go ahead, Lisa.
it can start just making its rounds. It doesn't have to wait for the SVSU because we changed that in policy 1000.
All right.
But we wouldn't want to add anything to the agenda tomorrow night.
No. Okay, the next one is, policy number 5145, condom availability, and Ashley is on for that one. And
Lisa, are you gonna, okay, put that one up on the screen. So really, the change that came from this was in July of this year, the AOE defined what secondary education is, and it is to include grades 7 to 12. So that's why we have to make a change to this, because it originally was only written for 9 to 12. But with that change from the AOE, we need to change it to grades 7 through 12. So it will be available at the middle school as well. And other than that, everything else, I think, Lisa, if you scroll down, was the same. We might have changed a little bit of the language, but it wasn't changing any of the actual.
that took care of the policy piece. And I think that the only question that I raised and says that when we made this 7 through 12, in this district and in Arlington, we have 6th graders in the same building. And we need to be able to understand or be in a position to answer that question if parents are going to realize that their kids are in the middle school building, and this policy is telling you 7 through 12, but we have 6th graders in 2 of the locations. Are there any considerations there? It says when we read the policy, in order to protect students and provide no records will be maintained related to any request for condoms. So we just need to keep in mind what it is that we may need to put in place or have to answer that question according to if a parent asks the question that I got my 6th graders in the middle school, or how you're going to keep them from getting them along that line.
Yeah, so I mean, the kids, as far as I know, how the program works at the high school is the kids need to, they do give their name to the nurse because they have to make sure that they've gone through the information with them before. So there would be that communication. It's not like there's just going to be a box of condoms out for anybody to grab. There would be specific people and locations that kids would go to, and we would provide that education at the same time. So that would be another way to verify what grade kids are in, is we would be meeting with them and talking with them. It's not just available to anybody.
Okay. That's any other conversation with that piece? So we have a consistent process, and that's in the administrative regs in section 4. That will be able to respond to a parent if need be as to what we do and how we do it, to make sure that we know and understand who is getting it understand, give education to the 6 through 7, 7 through 12 people that are requesting the use to obtain condoms from the dispensaries and so forth. And part of that would be that those particular groups understand that they have 6th graders in their building and they should be obtaining them and passing them along to them.
Right.
Okay. Is there anything else on that? Anybody online?
Leon, I did have something. This is Bill Basic from up in Arlington.
Okay, Bill, glad you're done.
Thank you. I did, this is, as I always do when the policies come out, I put these by my administrators. And we were discussing this summer as well when the new law came out. 2 things they'd like to see. I mean, it's up for discussion. They just gave to me was one, they thought they'd like to see a more general, neutral policy name instead of condom availability. I would leave that up to Ashley, whatever, they call the multiple prophylactics people use. And then they also wanted the dental dam somewhere in the policy, as Arlington, I think, is giving out dental dams.
So those were the two feedbacks from everything that was sent out. That's the only feedback I got back tonight. So I'm just passing that along.
Yeah, and that is my understanding at the high school as well, Bill, is that they do give out female condoms and dental dams as well. So they do already do that at the high school, but I don't necessarily know if it's reflected in the language in this, because this was written before I came. So I think that's a topic that we could discuss, certainly if we feel like it needs to be.
Well, I'm gonna go back. We put everything under the word condom, so, we try to put a general neutral name in the policy, the information, and then further distinguish things in the administrative regs. And so, Bill is saying, that they were concerned in terms of that. I don't know what other name we would wanna call it.
Make a slash and make a condom/dental dam availability. I don't know.
I think you just call them prophylactics.
That's in there. Yeah.
Prophylactics availability?
I just put that out there. That was not their term. I would leave up to Ashley. Maybe she could, I'm not the one that I think would, I don't know.
Well,
I just took that out because that's what they were called when I was in high school. I don't even know.
Not an expert, Bill?
Well, at this particular time, that's why we're having a discussion at this meeting here. And if we think that, and I know we don't want to put action on the spot for anything for that, but if a prophylactics is the appropriate term that would take care of the other items, then it would be appropriate to say that or make that change and send that around to everybody.
Yeah, again, they're what they relayed to me, Leon, was that condom is really, is for one sex, it's not a unisex policy. So that's what they relayed to me. So I think anything that would be inclusive of both females, neutral general, and males would probably work.
Okay.
So I will say that in the actual AOE update, it does reflect, it says make barrier methods, condoms and dams available to students. So we could use the language barrier methods and to fix that.
I think that's a great suggestion, Ashley, to use their language.
Yep. So that's the language that's in the AOE's memo that they sent out.
Okay, do we have that in the administrative regs now?
No, I
No.
don't think so.
We would name this barrier availability.
So going back to the name, the comment was to remove condoms and say, and I think you said barrier
Methods.
Yeah,
barrier method.
barrier methods.
Barrier, BARRIER, barrier methods. So it'd be sexual health barrier methods. And then if you wanted to, we could put in parentheses, condoms and dams available to students. That's the language from the AOE document. I can share that my screen if you need me to with that document's language, if anybody wants to see it. But
I'm just trying to make sure we didn't put the topic, make it too long. So,
right.
and
Is that right, Ashley?
I would think that
barrier
would be,
method.
yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
Ashley, do you want to say, you said sexual health barrier methods?
Sexual health barrier methods. Yep.
okay.
Okay.
All right. So, and then with that being the topic, do we need to change anything else into the policy? We, in line 1 of that, we use, let's see here, appropriate counseling will be provided by Pacific trained and designated faculty staff of each student requesting.
So I would think any place where it says condoms.
That's right.
You would put the word
Sexual barrier
sexual health
method.
Barrier method.
barriers.
All right.
Yep.
That's what I wanted to make sure that we all was in agreement to do. There's about 4 places out there. You got one of those buttons that you can just push that and it'll hit them all, find them all. Okay, are there anything else that we think needs to happen there to this particular policy? And that if not, we can have this available to put in the works for SVSU or the boards by the next in a proper rotation out there. Is everybody in agreement with that?
Do that in January.
It'd be January or February. I mean, in terms of dissemination, but the policy will be able to go to the boards and then come around and still come back to SVSU. You all set, Jackie? I saw that smile before you raised your hand.
Yeah. So I looked up the words sexual barrier methods, and it actually specifies 4 things. I don't know if you want to include all 4 things in your schools, because it goes from cervical cap, male condom, female condom, spermicide foam, sponges, and film. So I think we need another word besides, unless you have all these things available.
Well,
Not currently. Like, I know the high school has female condoms, male condoms, and dental dams. That's what I believe that the high school currently has from Planned Parenthood. They're the ones that provide everything to the school.
but so what you're saying, Jackie, is you found that definition includes more than just what we just indicated, and that would be just fine, because at some point in time we won't have to come back to the policy to get those if there was a need to have them in the school.
Right.
And the same thing in Arlington area, they'll be able to use those. I mean, get them. And we can easily add whatever we need to do to the administrative regs if we need to spell out more in terms of a definition for that, as opposed to a header change. Is that okay?
Are there any things in the six items that you have up there that could be excluded and put into admin regs?
These are all admin regs.
Right, we have 5 pieces, but then on the back, those are, the 6 on the back of that admin regs.
Yep.
And so those could be massaged and adjusted by the school administrators to take in what we've just discussed and what you just brought to our attention about sexual barrier methods and so forth. All the things that need to fall under that can be worked into the administrative regs that need be. Okay.
Okie doke.
All right. So we set, Lisa?
Set?
Okay, so thank you, everyone. That was a good, healthy conversation. I learned something here.
Just want to remind you, Dean has indicated to me she's got about 15 minutes that she can stay with us, and then she needs to move on to another meeting, or she will lose the cell service of where she is.
Okay.
This next one should be easy.
The next 2 are just an FYI. We just updated to meet with the current practices. Those are just changes to the admin regs. There's no policy changes that are being made.
Okay, that's communicable disease and screening.
Yep, that all just is being updated to reflect the current practices and guidance from the Department of Health and the American Academy of Pediatrics. So,
And we'll just let that go with that.
Yep.
Is that good with everybody?
Yes.
All right. Then that would be all from the nurses, is that correct?
Nope, one more.
Screening.
5,100.
Screening, yep, same thing.
Same thing,
though.
though.
Just
Oh,
changes,
5,100, I'm sorry, screening, I mentioned screening and communicable diseases together. So both of those are, go ahead, Ashley, is there any questions?
Just admin reg changes, just to reflect the changes that have been made by the state for required screenings, that's all.
Okay. Is everybody good with that? That's good. All right, well, I want to thank you because we didn't want to, you're welcome to stay as long as you want to. But
I'm gonna go home and
Sure.
feed my children.
Don't you have some contact tracing to do?
I'm sure I probably have something to do, so I'm gonna go. Thank you, everybody.
all right, thank you, Ashley.
Thank you, Ashley.
Yeah. Okay, we now come to that time in the meeting where we're gonna I wanted to have a discussion, and I'll open the door and Dina still have an opportunity to speak, right after this. But this policy 5090 is a big policy. I see it as a big policy, and the reason for it being is that we've had a lot of external things to take place in the country, the schools, with parents, with COVID and so forth along this line. And I wanted to find a way to over time, and I say over time, over 20 some years, we have migrated to the use of law enforcement in the school as opposed to having teachers, building administrators and vice versa spend more time understanding the students. And it's always some exceptions to that, but to understand them to the point where we have all the things that are taking place nationwide, we need to better understand what's going on in the minds of our students so we can educate them. And that if something needed to be known about students in which it was necessary to involve law enforcement, we would have a firsthand knowledge and understanding of what it is that needs to probably be done and referred to the proper counseling and involving law enforcement is necessary. And I think this is the policy that needs to sort of address those kind of things. So I'll open the door that way and let Nina start to talk about some things there. Because the first thing that I saw in there in the policy is that we want to, because our time is limited, let me just go to her and have her talk about what her concerns are. Are you there, Dana?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay, so I do want to start off by saying that very specifically, this policy is about law enforcement or other agencies that come in to, well, it uses the terminology interrogate a student. So that's different. One of the things I highlighted very quickly, and Lisa, I just sent you, Laura, I'm sorry, I think, and Jim, I sent you very quickly just a couple comments that I had on the policy. Wasn't sure, Leon, where your concerns were with the policy. I think this policy is an old policy. There is a difference between an interview, if I can use that word, between a police officer and a student, a social worker from the Department for Children and Families and a student, and your staff and a student. And so let me go with the first two that are really easy. Law enforcement needs to follow the same rules. And when I say law enforcement, I don't mean within your buildings. I think like your high school, you have identified employees of yours who handle discipline, disruption issues. I'm not quite sure what their actual title is, but I don't want to pin a name to it, but you do have individuals who handle those disruption issues within your school. They are not law enforcement, but you also do, in some of your schools, have police officers from the police department coming in and doing details. They're not school resource officers. They're just coming in and doing an extra detail. They are employees of your police department. And so this policy is looking at what sort of the role is of how the school is going to respond with law enforcement, like those police officers coming in on a detail, or there's a disruption and one of your principals calls to have the police come on site. Or if DCF comes in and says, hey, we need to have a conversation with a student about we need to do an interview about a potential issue of neglect or child abuse or something under DCF's rules. The policy, in my estimation, I get what you're saying, Leon. If this committee wants to sort of modify what you believe, or modify what you want to put out as sort of your philosophical underpinning about how you see law enforcement coming in as a separate entity into your building, then we really should talk about definitely, having a further conversation about how you want to rewrite that. I will say this, I will carve out that DCF specifically within their own regulations has where they would prefer to interview a student who is a potential victim at school and with school personnel, administrators involved, because it's an environment, especially if one of the parents or somebody in the home is the alleged perpetrator, or we'll go with alleged perpetrator, of doing something untoward towards the child. They don't want to interview the child, obviously, with that parent knowing, or that adult knowing. They want to have it in a more neutral environment than at DCF, with people that are supportive of the student. So that's a very separate issue. But police have, when they're doing searches of students, because your policy covers this, the police themselves have to have probable cause to do a search. School employees do not have to have probable cause. They have to have a reasonable suspicion. So it's two very different levels, and I think your policy doesn't outline those differences enough. And it doesn't address one of the major issues that I quickly put out to Jim and Laura today, of the fact that there never should be, from my perspective, where law enforcement turns to one of your employees and says, you interview or interrogate the student, or you open the locker while I'm standing here under my direction. Because what they're trying to do potentially, or what at least they confuse and they obfuscate, is whether or not there is probable cause or reasonable suspicion. So that's concerning to me, that your policy doesn't outline that very clearly, in my estimation. But what you're talking about, Leon, is much more, it's a broader philosophical issue. I think when you call the police into your building, in this policy, you're taking on the obligation to say, hey, we're calling you in, but we don't want you talking to anybody in an interview / interrogation, unless, if you're under 18, unless your parents are notified. You're taking that obligation of notification. And I think you may want to separate out roles and responsibilities better in this policy. The issues that you raise, Leon, about the concern of law enforcement involved with students, it is obviously something nationwide that is a concern, especially when we're talking about members of the BIPOC community, but I think it's a concern also for people who are not members of the BIPOC community, right?
Right. Yeah.
There's a heightened, I think, sensitivity and awareness of this potential for discriminatory behavior with members of the BIPOC community, but you're a learning environment, and you're an educational environment. So if that's something you want to go down and sort of list out from the board's perspective about how to set or not how, but to set the expectations of what you think will be done from your staff in terms of involving law enforcement, that's a major rewrite of this policy. I think there's some feedback I could give you on that I've put into actual contracts between police departments and school districts for the provision of having police details or SRO services. And I just also need to go on a tangent here. SROs are people who are law enforcement officials who have taken very specific trainings. And a large part of what that training is about dealing with trauma, developmental issues, students with special needs, and a whole host of other things. And that is a whole separate thing than what is presented at the academy for a police officer. So that's a very distinct category for me. So I'm not sure you're going to get through this policy tonight.
Doesn't sound it.
We didn't expect, we wanted to have a discussion to open the doors up for everybody, and you just happened to be first. I mean, I brought the door open, so you could
Yeah,
go ahead.
I will tell you from a legal perspective, I don't have any problem. I think you all are well aware of how I look at policies, which is different than procedures or your administrative procedures, whether it's board procedures or administrative procedures. Policies in and of themselves are a statement. It's a philosophical statement of and setting expectations of what you're looking for to be done in your educational environment. So I don't have any problem legally if you want to expand this out. I have always had a problem with this policy because it doesn't clearly set up the distinctions between law enforcement talking to a student, DCF talking to a student, or your staff talking to a student. And for clarity, I've always found it to be lacking. So that's my major concern with it.
Right, and I think those are some of the things that I really wanted to bring out and say we wanted to do that. But I wanted to make sure too is you hit on two things. One, that the school, that employees are not agencies of the law enforcement, and that's something we stay in the policy, and we really needed to do something about that piece in there, because it takes hands off when the employee reads that, a bag off and says, I don't need to do anything or know anything. I'll just bring in law enforcement for that. And I'm trying to make sure that our policy sort of go after that and address that a different way. That's how I got into teachers, administrators, or whatever, being much more aware of the situations with students that they handle, and a teaching besides just the classroom environment. They need to know more than what's actually, at least the time now calls for more to be known about the peoples who we serve in the educational environment by the ones that are educating, so that if something were suspicious, they will be able to handle it if necessary within the school environment before it goes to law enforcement. And that means splitting out things if we need to split out some things.
Is there no, I haven't looked, but is there any kind of state model policy that we can start with here?
I would imagine that's where this one originally came from.
That's where we did have that, but it's not for what we are talking about.
Right.
Well, I got that.
So we got, and that's why we knew we were gonna have some work. Tonight was to have some open discussion, and get as much information as we possibly can and see which ways we can actually go for that, along this line. The bottom line is, I wanted to make sure that education, and you hit it, Dana, is the education environment should be treated different than the law enforcement approach or education on things. And I don't know whether I said that all right or not. Jackie, you got some?
Yeah, yes, from a teacher's perspective, when they look at policies like that, they always ask the question, what am I supposed to do? In other words, as a teacher, for the most part, they know that they are a mandated reporter in questions about student molestations and other things like that. But recently, in this last shooting at a school, I was thinking to myself, yes, teachers are mandated reporters, principals are mandated reporters for certain things. But what about this kind of knowledge that a person might commit a shooting, or could commit a shooting? Are they a mandated reporter in this instance? And so that would fall under the communication. Is that communication kind of sacred, or can they share that with the police? So I have a lot of questions after this last shooting, especially since they went after the parents. And I was thinking, well, maybe they'll go after the school too.
Leon, Dina needs to leave in like 2 minutes, so we want to ask her anything before we dismiss her.
Well, I do want to keep her retained to do some of the things that she's talking about, splitting this up and defining certain roles and expectations out of there, so that we'll be able to do that, and we'll be marking up and drafting up probably for several months out there on this thing. So if she would accept that task, we'll.
I think there's a lot of work. Yep.
Yeah.
Dina.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I mean, if you all want to have a further discussion without my, and I do apologize, I have another board meeting I have to do, but if you want to have a further discussion without me present, and if questions do come up, if you could maybe just sort of run them through Lisa and she can get them to me. And I can respond to them. I will tell you in all honesty, my schedule is, I'm going to not be available from the 9th of this month until the Monday after Christmas. For the very first time, I'm actually taking time off in the middle of the school year. So I apologize for that, but I'm kind of looking forward to it as well. So, I mean, I'm more than willing to get something, if you have a January meeting, to do that up. And I'm assuming with budgets and everything else and the holidays that probably will work with your schedule. But if you just send it through Lisa, I can respond to that. And the other thing I wanted to say, just as a tangent, yes, Jackie, under FERPA, there is a provision if it's an emergency about releasing confidential student information. Let's hope we never, ever have to get into that position to do that. But, so there are ways of doing things, but if you just want to let me know, but I'm more than willing to take a stab at adding some things in there and separating it out for you, Leon.
Okay, I appreciate that, because that's what we want to do. We are probably looking at least 2 to 3 months on this particular policy. So we got plenty of time, and I'm thinking we may not have a January meeting, after the holidays, so we'll probably be into February before we meet again. But the goal today was to open it up for the committee to consider a lot of the different things and have a chance to talk it up at their regular board meetings if they want to talk it up, or whether the community has a chance to talk up some things so that we'll find out what they are and then see what it is and how we need to go and approach those things. So I want to thank you for spending the time with us, and I thank you in advance. She's already gone. Yes. Okay, so we now know some more things from legal, and it was what we were thinking. I was thinking about trying to split up some of these things. I may be asking for too much in one thing out here, but I definitely wanted to make sure that a lot of the type of things that I'm thinking out here occur and may be misunderstood or misinterpreted because there is a lack of knowledge of the population or the people that we are actually trying to educate in terms of understanding them. And that's where I got on that part of saying, okay, we need to be a little bit more understanding of the group that we are trying to educate so that we'll know how to best educate them without having to involve law enforcement, because high school and elementary kids and so forth, they're going to make some mistakes. They're going to see things on TV. They're going to see things out here in the community somewhere, and they are going to be influenced by those things. Should we not have enough knowledge to recognize those? And if we think they need to be managed within the school environment, which would be one of those roles, then it would say, well, what the school role should be. We have things that we say should happen to students if they do certain things or say certain things and act a certain way and so forth. I just want to better enlist those things out there so that it won't be like hands off and somebody else is just coming in to the school. And when we use the word, especially line 2 of the policy, when we talk about employees are not agents of the law enforcement, that is a true statement, but we don't need to put that in our policy, I didn't think, up front, because that is a hands-off statement when it comes to individuals that are responsible for doing things within the school environment that are not students. And so that was my approach, my looking at that. And so I'm saying we needed to do something along that line to not negatively impact individuals from trying to understand what it is they need to be seeing when it comes to students and what they may be hearing or seeing from students that may be disruptive or that may need some attention and that may influence their educational process that they're trying to use to educate the kids so that they can sharpen their pencils and do things in a different way, which is kind of hard for me to say that. So let me open that up for you. We got Dick and France and Jackie here. We don't have to do a lot tonight more, but we got Jackie's got her hand up. I can't see because the policy is in the way, whether we got Nicole, we got anybody else behind that's got the hands up. We can't see you, so you can speak up. Jackie?
Okay, so in light of what Deanna just said, I would like to suggest that we divide this policy into two policies, one for social services and one for police. And I think then if we do this, I don't want to say it will be simple because it's not simple, but the one for social services, if we do this one first and dwell on it a little bit, and then we go to the policy with law enforcement, because the language is different for both of those, as Deanna explained, and I think would be more comfortable rather than dangling both of them and putting them in juxtaposition as just having two. I don't know if everybody would agree to that, but I just think it would simplify the processes.
You mean, divide them, well, you use the term two policies as opposed to two sections in the same policy, two.
Right, so it says interrogation or searches of students by law enforcement personnel or social services agencies. So I would like to have one policy for law enforcement and one policy for social service agencies.
Okay, that's an item for discussion out there. That's something that could happen. Anybody else that along that line? You're still going to have a portion of that. Either one of those policies is going to involve school administrators or somebody in that area. So you're going to have a top part of this policy that's going to have to address, first of all, how do we get to law enforcement and how do we get to social services? And what are the vectors, or what are the things that are going to allow us or lead us to be able to contact them? So if we separated them all out, and this is just me saying it, keeping them under the same thing and then giving the general responsibilities of what the school personnel should be looking for and doing. And when it comes to the point where there are certain things that need to be handled by law enforcement, they can be contacted by the school administrators and manage those things. And those that may need to be handled by the social services department first. I mean, some of those come in, they may contact the school. Both can contact the school and say, we have something that we suspect or not suspect or whatever along this line that says that something should be happening in the school environment by somebody before everything is just released, meaning that we may have to notify the parents, except for DCF or whatever it says that they do something totally different. So I'm a little bit, open for the discussion and saying how we want to split it, how we want to set it up so that we won't be teaching a lot of the information and be less confusing in terms of the administrators, the school individuals that are going to have to be facing these things. The information will be the same in terms of how we start out these things.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No.
Okay, well, we can try it.
Well, if anything, I mean, we could put the two of them on the same page, but I think the handling is completely different. I didn't
Yes.
So that's why I suggested that we have two different policies. So in other words, frequently, and I keep going back to the bottom line. The bottom line is what do we do for the child or student, and what do what are the responsibilities of the school or the teacher? What are the mandates that you have to follow? And in my previous schools, I was not to interrogate a child. I was not present when a child was interrogated, but that was all social service types of things. And for the police, while I was in a military community, they just got the parents and brought them to the police station. So I'd like something more, something laid out a little bit more. And as I said, this is just my thinking from these recent events from Michigan, where the parents are now being pursued as culpable. And I don't know how culpable the school is for not reporting what had happened. And that's my concern.
Right. I think we're talking pretty much exactly the same thing. It's no difference. You definitely gotta separate the two things and have a broader, fine definition of what the roles are going to be. It's just that getting to that from the school, that school that you mentioned for the school administrators apart. First of all, trying to give an example, the administrators along with the teachers are going to be observing something before it get to either one of those two people for the most part, or maybe not, but that's the part that I'm saying that ties the two of them together. And that role or responsibility that we need to have in making sure that we notify those groups or work with that group in some form still need to be spelled out. But I think it just need to be on one head of it. We can, I mean, that's just a start. So we can do it too, separate it out, but if we separated them totally out, then we'll see that we'll be duplicating a bunch of the information, and maybe then we can put them back together.
Can you, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you, after the first paragraph, can you begin a social service labeled section and start with number 3? Change a little bit of the wording that excludes things like interrogated by an authority, and those kind of things. And that, I think, falls under social service without law enforcement, at least to get this thing started. We're talking philosophical here and we're not doing anything.
Right. Well, that's again, we can agree to start it some kind of way. I just want to make sure it's okay with everybody. So keep right for the time being saying, let's try separating things on the same policy piece for the different groups. And then if it needs to be broken out totally separate at some time later on, we can still do that. Is that okay to start that for the sake of trying to get something going in some direction?
I think that's excellent.
Okay.
And I think we should start with the social services one, because we know that one best. And when we meet with Deanna again, she could hone in on the police things. But when we do the social services, it would be good to have one of the counselors there, because they know what's mandated best, or maybe Jim could chime in on it. But I think we need to have it reflect what's going on now.
I also think we should do some research before we start drafting our own policies to what model policies the Vermont School Board Association has, especially when we say we're going to split into two. Because our policy does not currently really look like what the Vermont School Board Association's policy is on this. It doesn't match up. So we should do some work exploring that way, to which when I mean like I can get that, we can get that for the board to review and see, because oftentimes when we start to struggle is when we are crafting our own verbiage as opposed to using something that's already been vetted legally.
Right. All right,
Right, and
that'd be good.
Policy is
Yeah.
20 years old.
Right.
So that's still one of the things we want to do. We want to freak out and start trying to get up information. So that's very good, Jim, for
I
that.
I'm sorry, I don't even think the VSBA has an interrogation policy. I'm looking at their site.
No,
They have
it's called something else. It has a different name. We do have a copy of it. And it does talk about I think it's like a search and seizure.
Well,
policy.
there are two policies. We have search and
Okay.
seizure and interrogation,
So
and the
we-
VSBA only has search and seizure.
Right,
Okay,
correct.
so we'll,
SVSU has a separate search and seizure policy. That's that model policy that went around, that
right,
you saw applies to that, not to this.
right. We do have a separate search and seizure policy out here. So
I think to Jim's point, just trying to be clear about what the intent is behind the interrogation policy before you go and modify it.
5085.
I have one more comment.
I mean, I
Okay.
will, yeah, and then I have one example for you when you're done too. with that.
So after we finish this, we could do a quick agreement on the conflict of interest in hiring.
Yes.
Could I speak to the
we're gonna get
security?
that.
This is my comment is more on the interrogation one. It's not necessarily interrogation, but one of the things that I frequently run into is, and it's not addressing a policy but this is following our legal advice from Dina Atwood. Frequently, law enforcement comes into the building and they want access to our cameras, and we don't give that unless they bring a subpoena. But you won't. It's just like so much can be found out. It's like a video interrogation, if I make that analogy to it. So, but I don't know if we find that in policy as much as that's the legal guidance that I've been following. As typically it's the middle school and high school, more frequently high school. The police, there's an incident and they want the camera. So we only give access to those cameras if there's an immediate danger or threat. And this is again following our legal guidance. Otherwise, they need a subpoena because so many other things could be viewed on that camera and someone's rights violated by that. So, and I can't say it's always been that way, that restriction is on there, but at least the Bennington police are well aware of it, and they frequently come now with a subpoena to access the cameras.
Yeah, well, that's because we have an access policy that addresses those things for that. That was something the school board mandated to put in place. Okay.
But it also triggers into this same interrogation. That's because what they're seeing, what they may be viewing on those cameras. So I think there's a lot. It's not just there's a domino effect here as we start looking at these policies, that there's so many other things that get impacted by it.
Okay, so that part would be with Dina and talking about when we do give them access, how much of that is really access in terms of what it is that they are looking at when you wanted to just, I'm looking for a perpetrator on the camera, and yet I see somebody else out here, vice versa, or whatever along that line. It's just an example. What it is specifically can happen. We need to clearly try to understand those things. So I didn't think this was going to be easy. That's why it's been put off for quite a time, because we do have a lot to talk about still when it comes to being, over being 18 and older or 18 and under, in terms of how we try to make sure we get in touch with the parent and so forth. There's issues behind that, and even though the policy talk about that you go out and do the best you possibly can, and without being successful, that you may be able to proceed on along that line. So I think we need to just make sure we understand that 17 and under and 18 and older, Is there anything else that we may want to cover tonight in terms of this policy? But that was this is a good opening. And so, unless and there's someone else that wanted to start tonight, we have some work. Jim is gonna find something that we're gonna be receiving to be able to look at. Dana's got some information that she's gonna be looking at along this line, and we'll be taking all that information in from any and everybody so that we can decide which way to go with that and how to massage the policy to best to do the best possible job for the students in the environment of education without having them and provide them the help that they need without having to be fully involved with law enforcement. So I think at this time we'll end this one unless somebody else has something online. No. Okay. We'll have this one back on for discussion at the next meeting. We have conflict of interest 4035, and I think Jackie said she had something that she had to say about that. I know what we had massaged this over and over and over again, realizing that the state of mind and the state availability of employees at this time in the district is at a stressful time. And there may be some need for some changes. And so this is what we thought we were putting into place, changes to better reflect the need of being able to acquire individuals in the district and avoid the actual conflict of interest as much as possible and find a way to manage it so that we won't be at a disadvantage when it comes to having to put talent into the school system. Jackie, you got something you want to say now?
Yes, I'm all set with that one.
You all set with that? Okay. Is there anybody else out there? If not,
I think we made the changes we want to make. Right?
well, we made them. That's right. And so I thought you had come
And
in.
it's,
So we're all set to go then with that, Lisa.
okay,
This is one up here.
Okay.
adopted. This was its second coming here
Okay.
after being,
So we're ready for posting. Okay. Let's see here.
We have already adjusted this.
I warned it.
Warned it.
Yeah, it's been worn all the way, so it's gonna go back out for the adoption piece there. Okay, the next thing we have is the tracking sheet that are on there, and just to remind, it'll have a lot more things on here going around and going out for the next time, but if there are other policies and pieces that we need to get to in here, and somebody can see a need for us to review those. We don't have to pick the hardest ones all the time. We need to get some of those that are in our listing that need to be just reviewed by the board because they have an older date. And I hear somebody hit me with a date and says, well, this date has been 10 years or 15 years old, and there's nothing we need to change in it, but we just hadn't reviewed it. And so we want to get that feedback from anybody of those particular policies, and I'll start trying to go at the list of all the policies just to grab some of those to put on here just for review and to make sure that we get them updated like we're supposed to be doing in terms of a review.
Can I make a suggestion?
Okay,
We should be communicating with principals on a pretty regular basis anyway, and those are the folks with the boots on the ground that need to deal with all these things. If we could ask for their feedback about policies they might be concerned with, how they handle things, the problems they've had trying to follow the policies, then maybe we get constructive feedback we can work with.
that's everybody heard that from Mr. Fran? We can ask the administrators, the teachers, whatever policies they have in trouble with. I think I remember Tim Payne saying something about these things right here.
Cell phones?
You know, yeah. I thought that policy was in pretty good shape about cell phones, but evidently there's some issues somewhere with cell phones. They got everything on them now. You don't need anything else. So we may want to go back and take a look at that.
Well, one of the ones.
We can make this part of the agenda with our principals when we
Yeah.
meet, we meet with them and ask, and then we could present it in an organized way of what their experience in, which is going to be different whether it's elementary or middle school or high school, but I'm sure they would appreciate being asking for their input. Some of the principals are going to come here tonight too, had asked, should they come tonight? But I said we weren't going to get into that specific yet. So particularly on the interrogation one, I said it was really going to be more what Dina had to say, but the middle and high school principals were asking if they should attend for that, but probably at a later date.
Okay.
6350, that's already on your tracking sheet. That is a request of our building administrators that has to be updated.
It's at the bottom for future.
Oh, yeah.
Great
Yeah,
advancement.
so I think you've got 2 on your plate right now. that
Okay,
Are important.
Yep.
Yeah.
so we'll be moving those up to do that.
Mhm.
But that's, I wanted to say that so that we can start to get more things in, and that's the mechanism by which we're getting them, not only from the administrators and so along that line of principle. There may be, if there's individuals out in the community that are grappling with the fact of a particular policy that we have in place and trying to better understand that,
Yeah.
and wanted to see us at
And-
least address it. And
Bill, Bill Basic, in your email today to me, there was another policy that you had mentioned. Has that been addressed to the? You there, Bill? See if I can.
Yeah, no, I'm here. I'm sorry. I'm just bringing myself back up here from my other work.
Yeah. I know
Yeah.
there were some policies that you had looked at that you wanted addressed. I said they weren't on the agenda for tonight. Yeah.
The sexual harassment Title IX policy, it's my understanding that it goes above and beyond the HHB policy that's now in place. It's certainly on the VSBA website, it's much different than ours. So I think we should probably take a look at that.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right. Is there anything else out there? If not, we'll indicate that now I can see who's out there. Karen and Jackie, Bill and Jonathan and Nicole. And anybody have any other questions for this committee tonight? If not, I realize that with all the things that we got, we need to ingest this stuff so that we won't be having a January meeting. We'll go into February, the first Monday of the month of February, to have our next meeting and have this agenda. We'll start out, we'll have this policy 5090 on, and then we have 6350 and a couple of other sexual harassment policies and some others that may be on there. And depending on what it is about the policy will be put in the category or orientated on the agenda so that we can either be progressive in getting something done before we get into ones that may bog us down. Is that okay? With that,
Nothing.
nothing in January, and we're
February looks like it would be the 7th.
February 7th. So if you hold February 7th date, I would appreciate it. And, right now, we're going to.
Already on my calendar.
Okay, we'll get out approximately, we have a motion to adjourn about 15 minutes early. It's been moved and second, and all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Anybody abstaining, opposed? I just want to thank everybody for coming out and spending the time with us tonight. These are very good, healthy, and very important things to do in conversation. So stay tuned.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank
Go
you.
Patriots.
Thank you.
Yeah.